All right, welcome back to episode two. Episode two of season 4. In case you missed the first episode with
Jump Scare Jen.
That was on Hereditary, and make sure you check that out because Jen always has some great insights. So this is episode 2. We're going to be doing a film which I'll introduce in a minute, but I want to introduce our two guests today first, Jordy and Kara from CJ Martial Arts. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hey everybody, we own a martial arts gym here in Nanaimo, and we focus on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, no-gi grappling, and Muay Thai kickboxing. And this guy just got his first degree on his black belt yesterday.
Yeah, good applause.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Crowd is wild. So I also, just before I introduce the film, I also wanted to just check in with the both of you about how, like, what your experience is with horror films, if you're fans or you just, how did you get to this particular film? Because I wouldn't be a lot of people's first choice to talk about.
I struggle with horror films a little bit. It took me a month to warm up to watch this movie.
Lots of procrastination.
But I do really enjoy some horror films, so sometimes I just usually send Mike a little list of hey, what's some shows I should watch.
Because you do ask for them, so some part of you wants to watch them.
It's very much a love-hate relationship. There's fantastic, shows that I watch that I love that are in horror, and then other times I can't get through them. So this was just on one of Mike's lists they sent me, so it was on my list to watch for a while.
Yeah. And I think I catalyst that a little bit by wanting to watch films. I like the scare factor, even though I do complain about the nightmares.
Okay, fair play.
Because Karen and I have gone to watch horror movies before in theaters and stuff. Jordy's usually too scared to come along. But
yeah.
I think of you as maybe more of the horror fan.
Definitely.
But then you said once that you distinguish between horror films and scary movies, right? What did you tell me that one time?
Well, I think I just was having the wrong idea of what horror encompassed for a while. I think I was thinking about horror as gore.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, which I definitely do struggle with. That's not where I gravitate towards. But scary movies or definitely movies that fall under horror, I think I just wasn't in my mind putting those in the horror genre.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think Mike and I have talked about this a lot. That's kind of what we really like about the genre, is that it's so broad in terms of you can get those really nasty, gory things that some people like, but there's also there's a lot of borderline films that kind of thriller, mystery, horror, where there's horror element to it, but there's also a lot of other stuff going on. So yeah, it depends what you gravitate towards, but I think that's what we love about it, is that it's so broad, it can appeal to a very wide-ranging audience.
And it's tricky too when you tell someone you like horror movies. Yeah. I think like Jordy, they immediately think just
100%.
buckets
of gore and 80s slashers. But there is a lot of other types of films that are categorized as horror that are not that. But I think people get the wrong idea sometimes about what encompasses a horror film.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into it today. The film we're going to talk about today is kind of where I lean a little bit, which is more of atmospheric horror as opposed to, every once in a while I will want to see a gory film, but that's
Terrifier 2.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking about. That's not where my first inclination is either. So I definitely lean more towards something that's more atmospheric or that has a creep factor as opposed to a gore factor.
Yes.
Just off the top of your heads, what are ones that you think of as your favorites? If I said to you, what's a horror movie or scary movie you like, just to give the audience a sense of where your tastes lean?
I really like The Ghost, the ship.
Oh, Ghost Ship.
Ghost Ship.
Yeah.
So I like a lot of scares.
Yes, jump scares.
Yeah, jump scares, definitely enjoy. I think I'm still figuring out what type of horror movie I like the most, which is very interesting to me. So I'm still on developing that, but gore doesn't really scare me too much. It definitely intrigues me, but I do like a lot of creep.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Okay, so go ahead.
Oh no, Jordy, I was just curious.
I just the same kind of thing. I think I like that kind of creepy feel. The gore doesn't really do it for me, and the kind of jumpy scare not so much, but more kind of that creepy. Yeah.
No spoilers, I guess, for the first half, and then we'll do spoilers at the end.
Yeah, we'll kind of wrap up our conversation, then we'll do a spoiler. Yeah, so spoiler free. If you can, if something happens, it happens. We'll try not to give away too much. Although the plot itself kind of and the title kind of explains
true.
what the story's about. So very intriguing. I know you're wondering what the hell are they talking about. So today's movie is another A24 release. Hereditary was an A24 release.
It was.
And interestingly, we didn't choose the films. Our guest chose the films, but this is another debut film from a director,
Robert Eggers.
So Robert Eggers. So this is 2015's folk horror, The Witch.
What went we out into this wilderness to find? Leaving our country, kindred, our fathers' houses. For what? For the kingdom of God. Let us pray.
And at least my opinion, and I know it's shared by some people, this is one of the best of 2015, 2016. So as we mentioned, Robert Eggers, also director of The Lighthouse and The Northman. And this was his debut film, also a debut film for Anya Taylor-Joy. She may have done, I assume, other acting work, but I think this was her debut film.
And she's done a lot since this.
Yes,
movie,
yeah. Ralph Ineson as William, Kate Dickie as Catherine, and Harvey Scrimshaw as Caleb. I haven't mentioned the twins, although I'll mention them later because they're like that. Speaking of creep factor,
Wow.
so this was, of course, the
What
other.
about Black Phillip?
I was just going to say the other character is Black Phillip that I wanted
Played
to
by
mention.
It's a very important role.
Billy the Goat.
That's right, Billy the Goat. So this is 6.9, very strong score on IMDb. Similar to Hereditary, 90% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and only 60% audience score. And I mean, I think we've talked about this before too. I certainly perceive that as the critics getting what the director's going for, whereas, and I'll mention this later, because I do think this was disappointing for audiences that went to see it in theater, because
It's not your typical horror film.
it was marketed, I think it was marketed poorly, as they often are, where they were, this is the scariest film since what, and it's like, that's not, that might get bums in seats, but it's not going to be happy times for people who go away from the theater.
Which I think is the expectation that these two had going into the
Right,
film. So I'm really
right,
curious
yeah.
to hear what they thought, or which side of those.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, they marketed that totally wrong,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
set me up poorly to watch it.
Exactly. And then you come away with a disappointment instead of maybe not lowering your expectations, but altering your expectations slightly about, I think if it had been marketed more as a period atmosphere piece,
Yes.
but then probably people are going to go, nah, I'll pass. I'll see it on Netflix or whatever and not go to the theater, right? So this was, this surprised me actually. This was an international co-production between the U.S. and Canada. For some reason,
Oh, I didn't
thought it was
realize that.
a British film. So the synopsis is, in 1630 New England, panic and despair envelops a farmer, his wife, and their children when the youngest son, Samuel, suddenly vanishes. The family blames Thomasin, the eldest daughter, who was watching the boy at the time of his disappearance. With suspicion and paranoia mounting, twin siblings Mercy and Jonas suspect Thomasin of witchcraft. By the way, did I even mention the title? This is The Witch.
The Witch by Robert Eggers.
Yeah, so sorry, that wasn't a spoiler because that's actually in the title. So Mercy and Jonas suspect Thomasin of witchcraft, testing the family's faith, loyalty, and love to one another. So we're going to do our best to be spoiler-free. Knowing what you know about this is kind of a Puritan period piece, witchcraft enters into the picture, and I kind of want to start with we've already touched on this kind of expectations going in, because I mentioned that only because that was my experience.
Me too.
So when I went in and saw this in theaters, I was expecting kind of this jump scare, scare fest sort of thing, and initially, when we got partway through the film, there was a slight feeling of disappointment, but by the end, I was like, oh, this is real. Like, I really liked this film from the get-go, and I've watched it several times since, but I can understand how a film goer would come in and be disappointed if you were kind of following the hype. So I'll let people jump in. Like, what was your, I think, Jordy, you already talked about, that was maybe your experience too.
Yeah, very much. it left me kind of, I felt like I was waiting for that part of the film through the whole film.
Right.
I was waiting for that, like kind of what they advertised.
Yeah.
And then I felt like at the end I left almost unfulfilled a little bit. Like, yeah.
Understandable.
Yeah, it was a balance between the speed of the show for me, like it was captivating enough to keep you engaged, but almost so slow that you earned for more.
Yeah.
Like I felt like there may have been more supernatural components, more creep components, and I really wanted those. So I think if I was set up to believe that that wasn't there, I would have enjoyed the period piece a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the first time I watched it, I was expecting a different tone. And it took me a while to get into it. And like you, kind of by the end, I was like, okay, it kind of does pay off.
Yeah.
But it does have a slow start, I would say. The first 20 or 30 minutes, there's not a lot going on. I think also the Old English, like it's a little difficult to hear what they're saying at times.
It is.
And so even for following the plot or following those finer points of dialogue, it's a little tricky. It would maybe actually be ideal to watch it with subtitles. And I found the second time watching it, it was easier to follow. But the first time I remember, I think, missing quite a bit in the dialogue for that reason.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, it shouldn't have surprised me, but I know reading a couple of interviews with Robert Eggers, he definitely wanted to make a different film, something probably that was more like what we were expecting, and maybe even a little bit far out from what we were expecting. Like if you've seen The Lighthouse, and that was kind of far out there. I think he wanted to make something maybe leaning more towards The Lighthouse, but being his first film, he definitely recognized that he had to make something a bit more conventional. And I didn't know that he had actually used, like, a lot of the dialogue is period dialogue from the Salem witch trials.
Yeah, apparently he pays a lot of attention
Yes.
to detail with his, like, the history that he puts into the Northmen, because I went to that with a Norse specialist, and he's like, oh, I'm so impressed. Like, all these little details from the sagas are all in there, and it's all authentic. And I actually teach some, like, period, like, from the 1600s, like, witch hunting and stuff in history. So a lot of this stuff is taken from, like, old, like, witch hunting pamphlets. And this whole idea of, like, signing the Devil's Book, and, like, that's all authentic. So Eggers does a really good job, at least, of, like, putting real historical details into his pieces, which makes it feel very authentic, I think.
And the costumes too. I mean, you would expect a period piece, but he was very much. He brought in someone who'd I think done archival work and museum work on costumes and things like that.
The witch's costume was really good, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. Probably the best.
Jordy did comment on the the reveal of that.
There might be a little bit of nudity in this film, just beware.
Yeah. Those. Well, you know, it reminds me of. Chances are likely nobody except me in the room. If Jen was here, she might have seen this. But if you look at the 1971 Macbeth,
I have seen that.
yeah, that has some frightening nudity in it.
It's produced by Playboy.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Roman Polanski, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that just total aside.
Have you shown that in class?
I have actually, and I received some strong feedback from a parent in the parking lot who, and I won't mention names, but shout out to the head of the school that I was at the time, who totally had my back. And the parent was not happy. Yeah, I showed it in grade 11, so I expected 17-year-olds to be
Okay with witch nudity?
well, to be mature enough to handle. It's like that was part of the story, and the parent was very adamant that that was inappropriate. And the head of school at the time only asked me one question: was it relevant? And do you think? So I guess that's two questions. Was it relevant? And do you feel like it was appropriate? And I said 100%. It wasn't gratuitous. And she said, well, then don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I say that in gratitude for having a teacher's back for. As opposed to the time that I showed
Hellraiser?
Hellraiser.
Is it relevant? No. Is it appropriate? No.
Thankfully, I never had a parent complaint about that one. Anyway, long story. I won't get into it. But
So actually, back to these guys for a second. I want to know,
yes, please.
did you like it, or would you say at the end you were disappointed in it and you didn't like it?
I think when the movie ended, I think I felt disappointment.
Right.
I think I was disappointed, and I think a lot of that comes from expectations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think, because we just watched it last night, like late last night, kids went to bed, so it's still pretty fresh. I think it's creeping in. Like the more you think about it, the more you go over things. I think it's getting better in my head.
Yeah.
But definitely left it with feeling like it was lacking and feeling like I was disappointed.
Yeah. My immediate reaction was disappointment and like, what?
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that to me?
Yeah.
And I almost felt like the movie was going to end 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
But then when I stepped back, I realized if that was the intention, the slow wait, the timing, the panoramic suspense, the music, like that was really good. And it did captivate me. And I am still thinking about it. So I feel like in that sense, if that's the genre, it was very successful. But it is frustrating me.
And they did a great job with the music. Like, that was one of the
So
things I
good.
really appreciated as I watched it. I even said to Kara, I said at some point, I said, I wonder if there's like small children learning to play violin that are like, one day I'm going to end up
It's
like
true.
this. Like, the violin in it was amazing.
I feel like I'll never use a mortar and pestle the same way now.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, exactly.
We'll get to that in the spoiler
Yeah,
section, but that's a good point for sure.
And I know, I mean, coming back to Edgar's attention to detail, he had asked the composer or directed the composer no electronic instruments.
Nice.
So you could only use real instruments.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a note that I made was about the music, the tension of the music, the discords, the dissonance, because that kind of sets you on edge.
Mhm.
How he's using music, but also how the music was composed. And I'll mention this scene, but oftentimes we don't talk about the lack of music. And there's one scene where something happens and Thomason comes back into their little house cabin, and it's completely silent.
Oh, it's such a good scene.
Yeah, it's such a good scene, and it's meant for you to sit with what's happened. There's nothing to distract from where she's at, and it's just brilliant.
He actually does that a few times where the witch will do something and it will cut to black for like quite a long period
Yes.
of time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess that kind of lets your imagination kind of fill in what's happening rather than showing you, but that I think has like a subtle effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Those were my moments of being like, is it going to finish? Is this
Yeah.
what is happening? Oh no, it's still going. And
And you kind of realize how rare that is to have just blank for a
Yeah.
longer stretch of time.
It's almost like a visual palette cleanser.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I don't want you to remember. I want you to, you might be lingering on that scene, but I want to refresh your vision for where we're going next, right?
But it almost does give your imagination time to kind of fill in the blanks, like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
like what is now happening?
Yeah.
Because maybe there was sound, but there was no picture. I can't quite remember now.
And I thought it gives you a little second too to kind of like absorb what just happened.
That's true.
right?
Yeah,
Like you kind
absolutely.
of letting that sink in for a second.
Yeah.
and also like relate with what you almost want to happen next. Like
Yeah.
you start thinking, okay, well, where's it going to go now? And you start anticipating where you want it to go.
Depending on how
Yeah.
like depraved you are.
Yeah, exactly.
What you think?
I was just gonna say, I love how everyone, like different personalities, use that blank section for different things.
That's
whether
true,
you're
yeah.
going back and reflecting on what just happened, or whether you're like, what's coming. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit of a reflection on our different personalities and what we would
Yes.
use that time for.
And the viewer's experience.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I do think some of my favorite horror movies are ones that maybe I didn't actually like at first or the first time watching it,
Yeah.
but over a couple days, like you find yourself thinking about it and you appreciate it more. I think I like this one a lot more the second time, knowing what to expect. And it is an interesting one to rewatch, I think, partly because you can pick up more of the dialogue and some of the other like subtle hints and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's, if you go in expecting your traditional building tension, jump scares, which I appreciate about this film that it didn't do that, because I do sometimes find it's so overdone and so cliche. I get a bit tired of just like build tension, jump scare. I think because we watch so many horror movies.
Yeah.
So this was more just so dark and bleak and psychological.
Yes.
I still had a jump scare. There was a couple moments where
I was just thinking.
Yeah, no, fair,
the
yeah.
tension was so building. It's like my body needed to let it out.
There's definitely there's one, even knowing what was coming. There was one with Billy,
Billy.
where the goat comes from out of the
Philip?
frame. Oh, sorry, but Billy the goat.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Philip, Black Phillip.
Black Phillip.
Even though I knew that that's what happens, it still got me when I watched it. I think this is the third time, because I watched this movie last year again. I think this might be the third time I've seen it, maybe even the fourth, but it still gets me. And it's still such a powerful scene because there's so few of them. And I think that's what's maybe so few directors understand is that if it's like many things in life, if you use it in moderation, it's going to have more of an impact than if you're constantly barraging your audience with jump scares or, the mirror flick or whatever it is that you're using to get a reaction from your audience.
Yeah.
I mean, the cheap scares have a place, but not in a film like this.
Yeah. I know Jordy often watches horror films under a blanket. Did you have to cover your eyes at all? Like, were there any times where you were horrified, or did you find it was mostly a slower pace and it didn't scare you in that way?
Yeah, it didn't. I sometimes, we joke about, but sometimes I look away, right?
Yeah.
Which I feel silly about as a 40-year-old man. That happens. And this didn't have that at all. Like, there was no parts in this where I'm like, I want to get out of the room. It was just, and it kept me focused. Like, I paid attention. It didn't lose me. But no, it didn't have that typical scary feel to me. It had more, like you said, like more of that bleak kind of.
You did gravitate from the end of the couch into my section of the couch, so you totally did a reversal flip.
Subconsciously, inching towards Kara. Yeah. I do think the performance also are really good. And it does have a slow beginning. I would say the first 20 or 30 minutes, but as a result of that, you get a lot of character development, and I think you care about the characters by the end, especially Thomason.
Yeah.
I also love the father. Like, he has such a distinct voice.
Yes.
He actually does a lot of video game voice acting.
I could see that.
And I can just tell right away when it's him, because his voice is so distinct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Playing Diablo 4 right now, and he's in it. And so it was interesting watching The Witch yesterday and then playing the game in the evening and having his voice is very distinct.
Cool.
So he's actually kind of like a big name as a voice actor for video games.
Yeah. I mean, I think all the performances are good. To me, unbelievable that Anya Taylor-Joy, this is her film debut.
Wow.
Because she's so strong, I think. But the dad, Ralph Ineson, is so good.
Oh, and the mother, who's creepy. She's in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she's Catelyn Stark's sister.
With the breastfeeding.
Breastfeeding, yeah, where she's breastfeeding her like
in her
8-year-old.
creepy breastfeeding.
Yeah, totally. Did you catch that? I was like, she's breastfeeding. She has a very creepy look to her.
Yes.
And those twins.
Yeah.
How do they make them so creepy?
I know, and just creepy and annoying. Those are the two words and so spot on for younger siblings, right? Just constantly getting under your skin and needling you, and kind of. I just found, part of I think the dread and the horror of a film like this, a period piece like this, is that historically, that it took almost nothing for someone to be accused of being a witch. All it took were those two twins to accuse her and then fall down and pretend to be out of it. And it wasn't until the father grabs the son and says, well, I'm going to, whatever he says, dash your brains out or whatever. And then the son's like, no.
I am awake.
Yeah. And to me, that's part of the thing that I really enjoy about period horror, is knowing that that's not made up. That's something that human beings have done to one another over time. And it's absolutely, and the father's, I think the other thing that's, horrific's a strong word, but that gives me pause, I guess, is the father's devout nature. He really wants to save his daughter, and he believes that she's a witch to his soul. And he's like, all you have to do, is take God into your, I just want to, and that's heartbreaking, because it's horrific and heartbreaking, because she isn't, mostly, and he just wants to, well, just tell me the truth. And it's like, I am telling you the truth, you're just not listening to me.
Yeah. The film's in a critique on religion, almost, I think.
Yeah.
That dogmatism does allow people to be so loyal to their religion. They're willing to turn on the people who are the closest to them in the name of that. And we can see examples of that across the world. And families willing to do things to other family members if they break the rules of religion. So I feel like that was maybe a sub-theme here.
And that relationship between, all of their portrayals to sin. Like, I feel like him not believing her was just a testament to his selfishness, his sin, his ultimate,
Exactly.
relationship with his religion. So they all really played a part. And if I were to do a trailer, I would have really leaned into that, like sin, lust,
It's true.
like excommunication. Like
Yeah.
that's what really brought me to the period piece, was
Yeah.
those connections.
Yeah, I felt like that was the main focus of the film,
Mhm.
like the apple coming out of the sun's
Yeah,
mouth.
yeah.
You know, I felt like almost everything had this play into religion and Adam and Eve.
And that was only developed once I was allowed to be like, oh, I'm disappointed. And now I'm thinking about it. And now I'm like, do I like it? I think I like
Yeah.
this film.
Yeah.
Should we transition to spoilers now, maybe, so we can talk about some of the themes and stuff without ruining it? Or is there anything else not spoiler we want to talk about?
The only other thing I want to say that hit me like right away with the film was like the color, or I don't want to say lack of color, because it almost had like that sepia color
I was
to
just
it.
gonna
It's very muted.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It wasn't until actually I saw they showed the forest and there was green in the trees where I was like, oh, there is some color to it. But it wasn't, it's not black and white. It just had this really actually beautiful kind of
Yeah.
sepia tonage to
I've
it.
got a note for that as well. Like
Yeah.
the whole, because to me, well, there's a couple of things that stood out technically. That desaturation
Mhm.
Yeah.
of color. I mean, it's filmed in Kiosk, Ontario. And Eggers would only film in natural light or candlelight, so there's no lights.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
They do often turn up the colors sometimes for those natural
Yes.
beauty scenes, and so it did look uncharacteristic of nature in film, I thought.
Yeah, and so because they often will boost the color a little bit, but I think again playing into what we'll get into, which is themes, I definitely feel like the desaturation of the color played into the bleakness, the dourness of the Puritan belief system,
Yes.
and all of those kinds of things where there's nothing to be enjoyed in life. This is just a journey to the next life, right?
And nothing happy happens in this entire movie, I don't think. It's
And-
misery from beginning to end.
There are so many panoramic moments, which I felt were really captivating.
Yeah.
So to have that bleakness really just like, I don't know, plays in the time,
Yeah.
the error. But yeah, there was a lot of like fragility in the show. Like you feel like things are like, oh, like the color's not sharp. Like
Yeah.
there's no real strength.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we can, maybe that's a good place to transition if you want to transition into.
Yeah, people just want to
Spoilers.
give their thoughts on the film, whether they recommend it or not, and then we'll do spoilers talk.
Cool.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear from you two
Yeah.
because I think we're both fans anyway of Eggers and of the film, but having just seen it and having had maybe a different experience than us, would you recommend that people see it?
I think I would. I think just for like the originality of it, right? Like I think it was beautifully done. I think it has a lot of like really neat aspects. I would just say like don't watch trailers for it. Like try to go into it just to watch a film, not to have any expectations, because I feel like that's what ruined it a little bit for me.
Mm.
But definitely as a film, I think it's beautifully done, and I think it's definitely worth watching. And I think I would go back and watch it again, and I think that would help too.
Tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the daytime,
Yeah.
the middle of the day.
And Kara?
I would recommend the movie. Absolutely. I feel as though I would want to set the scene though, because with the time that I've developed, and especially with, knowing that we were going to be here today, I really put some thought into it. I mean, maybe I want someone to go on the same journey that I did. It's hard to say, but I think I would definitely say that the actors, like that young boy in his main scene, that was amazing.
Yeah, so
And that girl having the debut, like that was good.
She's really
Like everyone, I can't say anything bad. The father's character was very captivating. How he was like gentle, like he was kind. I expected him to be more mean and
yes.
maybe a little bit like abusive, but it never came. And so
the
there's-
mother's almost the harder one, and
Yeah.
she has the one soft side.
yeah, and lots of hysteria.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I really respected the acting. So in the sense of it being like panoramic view, great sound, great acting, definitely watch the film. But it would be nice to kind of know what you're expecting, I think, because then there would be a lot more appreciation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've often talked about that's been a ruin for me going in to see films. Is my expectations were not met, and
Yeah.
and I think almost always because my expectations were unrealistic about what I was about to see, either because I watched trailers and it hyped up a certain aspect of the movie. Like we were talking just before we started recording about Renfield and Nicolas Cage. And I expected that to be much funnier than it was. And I had different expectations. And so I'm disappointed at the end because the trailers give me one film and the film gives me a different film, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's such great advice. We've talked about that too. Like, don't watch the trailers. If you want to have a good experience and experience the film for what it is, then just go in and watch it. But it's so hard to avoid
Yeah.
trailers, right?
Well, and so was it Barbarian? Is that the one?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So Mike got me to watch Barbarian, and he said, just don't look it up.
Yeah,
don't watch
absolutely.
any trailers. Don't.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it so much more because of that.
Yeah.
I wonder if directors get frustrated that they create this film
Mhm.
and then the people marketing feel this need to either misrepresent it or give away all the scariest parts of the jump scares. Like, I wonder if they're on board with how films are marketed or if they're frustrated by it. That's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I wondered if they should write off on it. I'd always think, oh, what a weird choice to make this your trailer. But
Yeah.
I guess maybe they don't have a vote.
Yeah, I think if it's a studio film, they probably don't. I think once you release it and wrap it up, that probably the studio has ownership about how they market that film.
Yeah.
Would be my guess.
Oh,
But
it's so frustrating. It's like
Yeah.
doing a beautiful painting and then someone being like, here's your frame. And you're like, oh, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah, totally.
Why would you put
exactly.
that there?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would like to see them dial back trailers a little bit. I
Yeah.
feel like they
Yeah.
show too much, they're too long. Like, just give me a taste and a hint of what it's about, but you don't
Totally.
need to show everything. It's
Yeah.
kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
I
Which
agree.
would have been perfect for this film. Like a
Absolutely.
bunch of little hints.
Just Black Phillip's face.
Yeah,
Freaking
and then-
there you go. That's all you need.
And I would have loved to go into this film with no expectations. I think that would have been the perfect way to go into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like maybe a little bit of a tribute to the bunny in the trailer too.
Yeah,
Like, if it's the creepy eyes, you're like, what's going on?
That's true. This film features a lot of animals with creepy
Yeah.
eyes. On that note, should we head into spoiler talk?
Yeah, so hopefully you've enjoyed our discussion so far, but we are treading into spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen the film and our discussion has intrigued you to go see the film, strongly encourage you to go do that without listening to the rest of this conversation and come back and join us when you've done that. So we're going to go into trailers now.
The witch grinds up a baby with a
Yeah.
post
Welcome
and
back.
smears it all over
Yeah.
herself. Maybe we should talk about that.
So
Oh
that
my
scene,
gosh.
that was one of my critiques of the movie. Was that scene was so strong, right? Like, and really good, right?
Yeah.
But so strong, and then kind of nothing met up with that
Okay.
sort of
Yeah.
horror wise for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
So I found that was almost. That was hard for me a little bit. Like
Yeah.
you kind of get put in this place, and then all of a sudden, the rest of the movie, as far as that kind of shock, is not there anymore.
Mhm.
The little baby embryo didn't do it for you. It wasn't enough gore. Little
gut
change
change.
just to pull you back in.
Yeah, and I felt that even the witch scenes and stuff after that were extremely tame
Mhm.
Yeah.
after that, which
Almost like there need to be a sequel, like a witch sequel, the perspective. Like, I
Oh.
want to know what's going on with
Yeah,
the witches.
I wondered
That's
that
what
too.
I
Yeah.
crave.
Yeah.
That's interesting, actually. And I find most films about this topic tend to take the sympathetic view of the witches and how they're being like persecuted and they're innocent and they're end up being burned at the stake or something. But this really establishes the witch as super threatening. Like
Yeah.
Yes.
this witch isn't messing around. Like, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I'm watching this historical drama.
Yeah, totally.
And then like
Yeah.
grinding up this baby. You're like, damn, this witch is for real. Like, it does establish the witch as a huge threat.
And just like the constant sound. And the whole time you're like, well, what is that sound?
Her wrinkly butt
And
kind
then
of
she's
jiggling.
like
Yes.
rubbing herself with the blood, and you're like, "It's the baby! She grinded up the baby!" Oh god!
Yeah,
And in
that's-
literature from that time period, like, that's how witches get their power to fly, is they
Yes.
have to grind up baby blood and smear it on themselves and smear it on the broom.
Okay.
Like that,
Yeah.
that's a real thing. That's what people thought. That's how witches can fly. Is
And
by
that
smearing
moon
baby
clip,
blood.
was that not a flying witch?
Totally,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, which is right after that scene.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, cool. Didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, there's I found another powerful scene that's not the opposite to that scene, which is very visceral, very gory, but the kiss scene with the
Mhm.
young
Oh, yeah.
witch. Because to me, I mean, tied up with the whole religion thing and the Adam and Eve and the apple
The lust.
is the lust, right?
That's his sin.
The burgeoning sexuality of, I mean, there's some lingering shots of Thomason's chest.
I didn't catch that the first time around.
Yeah,
Because
see,
somebody did.
I caught that because you can see that her
Mhm.
brother is like looking at her.
I'm
Did you catch that?
surprised. Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
infidelity.
it was very interesting to see that, and then see, and you know, it seems like 12-ish, 13-year-old boy, which is exactly what you'd expect at that age, and there's no other females around, so who are you going to turn your attention to?
Yeah.
Black Phillip.
It could be.
Oh, wait, this is now Alabama.
That might get us some hate.
Sorry to my listeners in Alabama.
So there's that long lingering kiss, and then it reminded me of the scene in the Shining where the woman comes out of the bathtub,
Oh, yeah.
and then you see that it's not what he's seeing. It's this, wrinkled, decaying corpse kind of thing, and that's what reminded me in this one with the hand coming out, right?
That was good.
It was, and just the idea of that tying into this young boy's sexuality and the idea of being manipulative and devious, and they know exactly what's going to turn him and
yeah.
what's going to draw him in, right? That was a very powerful scene.
Because she's just playing psychological warfare on this family and preying on all the
100%.
different weaknesses
Yeah.
and their sins. I think, as you say, like, that's a good point.
I feel like there is very clear sins, but I'm still trying to figure out the girl's sin, although she, I mean, a spoiler alert, but she was the one at the end that did turn into the witch,
Mhm.
right? That got like coveted or brought by the devil.
Because the father's clearly pride.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And you
he's
could say the
selfishness
mother
and
is
pride.
wrath. And there's 7 of them, too, which is interesting. Like 7 deadly sins. There's 7 family members.
Mhm.
I don't know if it tracks perfectly.
Yeah, because I can't imagine what the separation between the twins. Like the twins
Yeah.
are basically the
And
same.
the baby's in
here.
the movie
Well,
for like 30
lies,
seconds.
obviously.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. I was trying to count. I'm like, there's not 7, but then there's
Yeah.
a baby who's not
Yeah.
there for very
Well,
long.
and the baby was not baptized, right? So
That's
he was
right.
just already
Yes.
condemned.
Yes, exactly.
True.
Yeah,
And so I felt like the movie was, Black Phillip, like basically separating this girl out from
yes.
everything, all her
She's
support,
alienated, 100%.
right? That she's
yeah.
just basically the movie is just him alienating her the whole time
Yeah.
to
Yes.
bring her.
Because you're understanding that Black Phillip is Satan, or Black Phillip is the witch? Because she shapeshifts, I think, into birds, into hares, which is very traditional.
Okay, but
The
so I
bunny was
thought
the
that
witch.
too. But now, did she like? So I think the Black Phillip turned into Satan.
That's-
what
yeah,
I thought.
so-
He's got
yeah.
boots and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, because I thought that the whole time. Okay, it's shape shifting. But then I'm like, is it though?
Well, the crow, I think, was the witch
Yes.
Yeah.
making the
Yeah.
breasts.
Okay.
But then
And the
so
bunny.
It confused me too because I made the assumption that particularly in that scene and that voice that they do is fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. I was like, please speak.
Yes, exactly. But so when you see Black Phillip and then you see the hand on her shoulder, the gloved hand, and
Yes.
the boots and so on. So I made the assumption that was Satan. But when the kids are fenced in by the dad
Yes.
into
Right.
the pen, they see a witch, and so in that case,
Because Black Phillip was in there with them.
That's right.
That's true.
I
I think
thought-
that's why I was confused.
Right, and there was no black goat. There was
Exactly.
only the white goats that
Exactly.
got destroyed. by
so
the
that's
witch.
what confuses me a little bit about.
Mm.
I thought it was Satan, but maybe it's just one of the witches that is
Yeah.
shape shifting.
Yeah, I found this painting, which I guess was maybe an inspiration for the film. It's called like The Witch's Sabbath, and there's witches offering babies to a black goat,
Yeah.
which I think is supposed to be Satan. So there's some idea that like maybe
Can you
this
see
was.
this? This is really good.
Well, we can put it up on the YouTube though. I think if you're listening, I guess you'll have a tough time. But we can actually flash this up on YouTube, I
yeah,
suppose.
yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah.
I have it here. But yeah, Witch's Sabbath by Goya from 1798.
Yeah,
if you
that's
want to look
great.
it up.
Yeah,
And there was another moment that I thought really had like a religious tone to it when they were praying. The fact that he wasn't holding the family's hand, that he like sat there
Is it the dinner table or?
like Jesus
Yeah.
himself.
Oh, interesting.
Like
I didn't pick up on
praying.
that. Yeah,
You know, like because he's his like selfishness. He's like, I am everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's like
comes
it's
with
such a
pride.
weird way to pray with your family. Like everybody hold hands while I do this.
Because did you get the sense that because they got kicked out, right, or excommunicated
Yes.
from the
Yes.
town at the beginning? Was that he was like, we're leaving you guys because you guys are not true Christians? Or were they like, we're sick of you calling us not true Christians and we're kicking you out?
I got more of that
Yeah,
feeling.
me
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that ties into his pride. Right?
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
that you're not following religion the way it's supposed to be done, the way I do it. And they were like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure we've got this under control. So if you're not going to follow the way we want to do it, then you can leave.
And the wife was so upset about
Yeah.
that. She
Yes.
constantly was like, you got us excommunicated.
Yes.
Now we don't have like supplies or the doctor. There's all these moments where she's constantly like, you did this. And then he like repents.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
he does the pray like, it was me, my selfishness that kicked us out.
Totally.
Oh yeah, that's such a powerful scene for the actor. He does so well.
And that's after she calls him out for being a hypocrite, right?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was important, I think.
Because that seems to be a thing too. Like, you can be as dogmatic as you want and think you're living a perfect life, but at the end of the day, like, no one can do that. Like, they all are kind of hypocrites in
Yes.
terms of
Yeah.
trying to live like a pure life.
Right.
And I mentioned this at the beginning, but I probably gave it away, but I was trying to be spoiler free. But that jump scare for me was when Black Phillip comes in and gores the dad.
Yeah.
And because he comes from out of frame, and you don't, at least I don't think you immediately see what happens. All you see is the reaction of the father.
Yeah.
And I remember in the theater kind of jumping in my seat on that one because it's so powerful. And the first time I saw it, I was still at that moment in the film, it's like, oh, well, is this kind of the cliche of the black goat, being the devil kind of thing? But no, there's something going on there. And that was the moment where it's like, no, there's something happening, because it's not like the goat is rabid. He's very focused on what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because he gores the dad, then he just kind of ambles away, and then he comes back for another strike. So you know exactly that this is not just some animal that's gone off the rails. This is actually something premeditated.
He's almost the creepiest part of the movie, I
Yeah.
think. Like, poor goats, they get a really bad rap, but I do
It's
think...
the eyes, man.
Yeah, but he like
Bulging
goes up on
eyes.
his back
Yes.
poofs at one point, and
Yeah.
it looks
Yeah.
kind of terrifying. Like, goats are freaky.
And interesting, like in the, I guess like a little bit of a spoiler, in the beginning of the film with the twins,
Yeah.
how much he had to contain that goat. I was like, whoa, I didn't really see the threat there.
Yeah.
He came out and he's like, whoa, goat, whoa, get back. And I was like, what's up with the goat?
Yeah, totally.
And then at the end, he just let the blows happen. Like, especially the second strike, he was like, yes, let me die in the strength of my wood that I like to pretend I'm the strongest man.
Yeah.
Just scenes of him cutting wood over and over again.
Yeah, or there's something, the irony of him, like, being buried under the wood that he chopped or something. I don't know what they're going.
I-
He can never escape his own strength.
Yeah.
I've struggled with that too, because even watching it yesterday, I'm like, I know that there's something going on with the chopping of wood,
Mhm.
but I couldn't quite get a grasp on what is he getting at here with the, because I felt like when the dad was struggling, either emotionally or with his faith, then he went out and chopped wood.
Yes.
It's like, so what's the connection between, and I don't know if there's necessarily a religious connection between the two, but what's going on for the dad other than distracting him and maybe focusing him, thinking about what he's doing or what he's feeling?
Because he consistently... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So this isn't all my idea. We were just start Googling stuff afterwards, and there's people talking about it being like a matter of he wasn't able to provide, he wasn't able to hunt, and chopping wood was his way to kind of get that masculinity provider
Okay.
feel back. And then at the end of the movie, got buried under it.
Yeah.
That's-
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
sense.
right. He had the I don't know what they call that. The whole lighting flint of the old school gun. Like
Yes.
the piece was
Oh,
very
yeah.
He
period
failed
accurate.
at those kind of hunter provider
Yes.
things
Yes, yeah.
repeatedly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that was gross. The milking of the...
Yes.
And the blood,
Oh.
like, I found that really unsettling.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nasty. Something
And that
wrong.
was that the black goat or was that a
No,
white?
white goat.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it was a white
Yeah, I
goat.
think so.
Yeah.
So I had a question though, because I might have totally missed something. We watched this movie, we put our kids down, and they were kind of still popping out of
Yeah,
bed. So
yeah.
we were trying to keep it a little bit quiet and stuff still.
I've
So
been there.
so
And then
we
the hallway, they'll sneak, so you don't know they're up. So
Yeah.
we really had to be on alert.
yeah. So we might have missed a couple of things. But what happened with the twins in the end?
Right? The witch
Did
came
they ever
in.
figure
Oh, I
that
think
out?
it's implied that they were... Because they were in that shed, right?
Yes.
And
And then when they come out in the morning, like, they're gone. Like, I think they didn't show them being killed, but they think the implication
Yeah.
was either the witch took them or killed them, or Black
Black
Phillip
Phillip
did them in.
Yeah.
because
but I
the goats were there,
It's true.
Yes.
but
Yeah.
you didn't see,
You didn't see the
any-
bodies. Yeah. At least not that I
anything.
noticed
Yeah.
either. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the implication was that they were taken out somehow in the shed.
Yeah,
Because the shed door was broken open or something,
Yes.
right?
The
But they weren't there.
ripped
Yeah.
Or the witch flew away with them and
Yes.
ate their blood. And
Actually, I did love that scene where she's playing peekaboo with the baby. And then when you look back and all you see is like her kind of horrified facial expression and the baby's gone.
Yes.
And you see the witch kind of running through the
And
woods. I thought that was a really good sequence.
That for the trailer, that should have been the whole tone.
Yeah.
Like that was very accurate to the depiction
Yeah.
of what the film was about.
Yeah. Interesting too that it actually plays up some of these like folklore fairy tale representations of witches too. The poison apple,
Yes.
though I think maybe it's also alluding to like Adam and Eve and the apple, but also like the poison apple. I think that's the
Yes.
Snow White thing, right?
Yeah.
She uses a poison apple. And then when the boy comes to her hut and she comes out, she almost looks like Snow White.
Yeah,
Oh,
very much.
yeah,
I got
for
that too.
Or,
Very well done.
and it had like a Hansel and Gretel sort of aesthetic to
Yeah.
it as well. So
Yeah.
kind of playing on these kind of fairy tale representation of
Yeah,
witches.
no, for sure. And I have no doubt, although I haven't done my research, but I have no doubt that the original Grimm's fairy tales are
For sure.
probably based in that medieval history of witches,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because they are depicted. It like you've got the crone, you've got the young.
And the Playboy version of Macbeth.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wanting to watch this now.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing, I mean, I think because it was so well done and a period piece, for me, it was very easy, in subsequent watchings, not necessarily the first time, but you start to see, for me, these different themes of, particularly with Thomason, but, liberty versus repression.
Right.
Because she doesn't sign, she does sign his book with.
She literally signs it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's part of the reason that she's allowing herself to go and do this is because she's been repressed.
Yeah.
Either you can argue by her father and her family or by the religion itself, which is what's dictating the father's actions. But there's also this idea of, at least for me, civilized people coming to tame the wilderness and the savagery of actually living in the wilderness and having to hunt for your food and plant crops that may or may not take for you, and all of those things. Like, how are you living? How are you surviving? To me, there was a real clear theme in the story of particularly those two things, kind of civilization versus nature and savagery,
Mhm.
and the freedom and liberation thing was pretty clear to me.
Well, ironically, she kind of is the one who doesn't really sin. Like to your point, like
I'm
what was
still
her
trying to
sin?
figure it out.
All the other family members kind of end up being hypocrites, but she's kind of the purest one. So kind of ironic that she's the one that ends up
Yes.
becoming a witch in
Well,
the
and I
end.
think that's a representation of religion in that time, that the pressure is where she was the one that ended up having the hysteria at the end, and
Or religion
flying
like destroyed
off.
her family, so she turns to the
Yeah.
dark side.
Yeah, like there's only two options.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
in that time, there's either, be with God or sin and be with the devil.
Yeah,
Like,
Go to hell.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. and how much they alienated, like the movie alienated her completely. Like that last scene that was so amazing where she's at the table.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there wondering, like, what could she possibly do now?
Yeah.
Like her
Yeah.
family's gone, everything's gone, right?
And interesting, like her puritanical life is so horrible. Like it's just suffering and pain and starvation. But then her life, when she joins this coven, like isn't she actually smiling? And they're
Oh,
all
yeah.
on the fire. Like it almost looks idyllic, which is kind of
Yes.
ironic that going to Satan and turning to evil actually brings you happiness and like a good life, whereas like her puritanical life was horrible. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if Eggers is saying like, yeah, Satan's where it's at. But what are your thoughts on that?
she looked free.
I think it's that release of like
From the repression.
yeah, she has to know that if she's the only one left, I mean, what's her fate if she's found by the other Puritan village?
Even being nude, like when she signs
Yeah.
the book and takes her clothes off, it's almost like now you're like free or you're liberated.
completely, yeah. I mean, because she's going to be tried
The witch was liberated.
and killed as a witch
Yep.
if she's discovered, right? Or all of her family's gone or dead. I love, the scene with Black Phillip and the taste of butter and a new dress and
Yeah.
like all of those things. It is, it's the temptation of the good life. I mean, it is the Matrix, right? It's like, well, do you want to be in denial and taste the steak and the wine and the cigar, or do you want to really know what's going on and the reality that you
Mhm.
live in? And I feel like what's missing, and this comes back to Kara's point about, I wonder what a sequel would look like, is she just being manipulated by the witches and by the devil? and you're being tempted by these things, but that's not going to be your reality
reality.
is going to
Yeah.
be yeah, you probably don't have a dress and you kind of bathe in baby blood for you know like so
Yeah.
And I don't think they were seeing the world. They were
exactly
very isolated.
Yeah,
Or-
exactly,
Or
right?
maybe they're witches and they fly around to villages and take babies,
Yeah.
and she does see the world, and she does get to eat, baby
Yeah.
fat butter and
Yeah.
all the delicious.
I hear it's a good
Yeah,
moisturizer.
I hadn't thought about baby fat butter. I'm sure that's quite tasty.
You might be honest up there for marketing.
That end scene made me wonder, like, were we seeing multiple witches in the movie? Like at the end,
Oh,
when they
that's
had all the
interesting.
witches, that made me
There was a
think
coven of them.
Definitely.
there was a coven of them. So when
Yeah.
we were seeing those different things happen,
Were they working
were they
together?
different witches, or was it all the work of
That's a
one
good
witch?
point.
Yeah.
Did they ever show the transformation of her into the hair? Like some of those, the hair or the bird could have been different witches, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. I
And
hadn't
her
thought
as the
about
beautiful lady
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
I thought those could all be different witches. I wasn't sure.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
And I just want to give prompts to that last scene, like in the way the witches moved their bodies.
Yeah.
Right? There wasn't like a lot of, I don't suppose there was a lot of editing going on there, but that creeped me. Like it got in deep.
That was my favorite scene almost. Like it's such a jarring juxtaposition to what the rest of the film
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this is, and there's a lot of light and warmth, which the film is totally
Yes,
devoid of.
yes.
Like ice cold until this ending
Yeah.
scene, which was, I think, really effective.
Played into what you said of now, with Satan and you're warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Party
I'm
time.
pretty sure I read too that was that scene is improvised. That's a dance troupe that does
Oh,
the witches
cool.
cover.
Oh, cool.
That makes
Very cool.
sense.
So and I mean the music is great throughout what music there is, but there's definitely that visceral feel at the end with
Yeah.
the drumming and the
We should start one of those improvisational witch dance troupe.
Yeah, I think so.
Take it.
What?
Maybe not. Maybe just on like the Speak podcast version, not the video.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah,
Our audience will disappear very quickly. Yeah.
I'm not sure we'd have very, very many viewers. Speaking for myself, of course.
Sorry, that was a conversation killer.
Yeah, it's like I'm totally derailed about whatever I was going to say there. No, I did have a note about the bonfire, the coven at the end, and the power of that scene. And her, I mean, I remember seeing this in the theaters. For me, the first time I saw it was there is a feeling of, I don't know if joy is too strong a word, but her release and her almost of peace,
Yeah.
the ascension when they all levitate and rise from the fire. There's a sense when you look at her face and you see what's going on that she's finally at peace,
Mhm.
not holding anything back.
No longer struggling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah.
heard, to be seen, to do the best,
Yeah,
to be believed in.
or to please anyone or meet a certain
Exactly.
expectation.
But didn't they make her look like Jesus on the cross at the end? Arms out,
That's
feet,
true.
feet crossed, with that tree behind
Oh.
her.
Oh yeah,
She came up like
I
Yeah,
didn't,
yeah.
I didn't even
like
recognize
Jesus on the
that.
cross.
yeah, I
That's
hadn't
true.
noticed that.
Yeah, it's well
Yeah, actually, I didn't notice that either, but that would make sense.
I did notice the ankle cross
Mhm.
as the witches were ascending, and I thought, oh, probably good call because you don't want them spread eagle as they're rising.
Here,
I just assumed it was like a modesty
A
thing.
functional.
That they would do like a functional thing for the camera work.
Mhm.
But that's actually I'm gonna have to go back and watch that scene now
Ah,
and see
good
how she
point.
comes up.
I got that feeling from it. They had that tree in the background that comes out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Very
Nice.
visual.
Anything else?
I mean, I think we kind of hit on most of the things. Was there any
Well,
other?
maybe we should come back to the twins because,
Oh yeah.
I mean, really, they build hysteria. They really put the family against her.
Oh, for
But
sure.
yet, like, where did they go? And, like, and their relationship together. Like, there was a lot of parts that they played, but I felt like they were
Their
major.
relationship
But
with Black Phillip. They were the ones that had the relationship
Yeah,
with Black
totally.
Phillip for
Yeah.
the whole movie.
And
and
that's
she was
what's
like,
curious.
"Can you hear? Like, do you really talk to them? Talk to me."
Yeah,
Yeah, because you were saying how creepy the twins were, right?
Yeah.
But do you think that's because they were being manipulated by Black Phillip and they were almost under the influence of Satan rather than that's what their characters were?
And the opening scene, they tortured the goat. Remember, they were running around singing some sort of
Yes.
playful song
Yeah,
about
yeah.
like getting the goat.
With the
So
stick.
Yeah, do they call him the king or like?
something.
I couldn't tell
It's
if
a
they were
creepy run,
annoying the
it was.
coat or if they were all playing to like chasing and playing each other. I
Okay,
couldn't tell.
But interesting that he seems to be able to influence them first.
Yeah.
And so much of like actual witch trials and people being accused was all starting with people just making false accusations,
Yeah,
or maybe
yeah.
they like the attention of being able to do that or throw their neighbors under the bus or whatever. But
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to me. He does talk once, but the male twin, what the heck's his name? I can't even remember.
Yeah.
But the male twin, he does talk, but it's mostly the female who does the talking.
Oh, that's true.
Interesting.
And that, again, to me, that's interesting that she's the one being manipulated potentially by Philip.
And to be fair, Thomason is the one. Is she the first one to imply though that
Yes.
she is the witch?
Yes.
Because they get in that fight by the river, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it's actually me." So I was wondering if that's the first time the twins get the idea that she might actually be the witch, rather than it's the twins who are trying to make her out to be a witch.
And
Well-
then there's a scene where the twins are talking to Black Phillip, and they're saying, Thomason has done this, Thomason has done this
Yeah.
to the baby and stuff. And I got the feeling that Black Phillip was saying the witch had done that, and because she had told them that she was the witch,
Mm.
they
Oh,
put
they
together
made that connection.
you have done these things.
Right,
Black
right.
Phillip has said that you did this and you did this and you did this.
Cool.
Where
Mm.
I think is then now they had the feeling that she was the witch.
So that would have been after that scene, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She did take it a little further with the river scene. Like, she
Yes.
really did lean into that, don't tell my mother I am the witch. She built up this story.
Yes.
She was physical with
Mhm.
them.
Yeah.
She sold it.
So maybe that's her sin a little bit. Whatever that.
Yeah, that was popped into my head too. I wonder if that's her sin. Her younger sister does mention it wasn't a wolf, it was a witch.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But then that's when Thomason takes it to the next
Yeah.
level, right? It's like, no, I'm the witch.
So she almost plays a role in her own.
Yeah. Maybe the
Downfall?
lying was her sin. Because she also, when
False
she
idol.
Mhm.
repented, she spoke about thinking of all the sins. That she had sinned, but only in her mind.
Yeah. I mean, this is what we had kind of mentioned off the top or earlier in the podcast was this is why I gravitate to films like this, is because there are so many layers that you can keep coming back to and questions where you go, I wonder how he resolves this idea, or I wonder what the director does with this idea. And you go back and watch it, you go, I think there's the linchpin. That's why Thomason is, so that's what I love about these kinds of films, is that if a film is well done, kind of like a novel or whatever, or a great album, there's always something you go back and catch. It's like, hey, I never noticed that before. Or I never picked up on that little bit. And every time I watch a film like this, we were talking about this with Hereditary, there's something new that I see or that I missed, or
Mhm.
some nuance that I wasn't aware of because I was paying attention to something else, right?
That's cool. I'm not used to being able to watch horror films twice. Like, I commonly don't like watching anything twice. I'm like,
Fair.
is it something new?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do like the evolution of your mind and the way that it develops from the stories and the nuances of things that you didn't see the first time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I almost, as I was saying in the beginning, what is my genre? Maybe this is it.
Yeah.
Like, gotta have a good amount of creep. Please give me some gore, Although I do hate
Baby fat.
child violence. I remember telling that, Mike, does it have any child violence? Because as a mother, that just
Of
irks me.
course,
But
yeah.
this one,
Did I
was
tell you
like,
the truth? I can't remember.
No,
No,
you
you
just
just smiled.
made a smiley face, and I was like, oh, I'm in for it.
That's the truth usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he thinks he's getting one over on you, but you can tell by the look on his face that he's got
So many horror movies are kind of fluff, like cotton candy. Like, you just have your jump scares,
Yeah.
but you would get nothing out of watching it again, probably.
Yeah.
But this one's really
Yeah.
rich. Hereditary is
Yeah.
very rich, like baby fat butter. You can go back and watch it multiple times.
And maybe
You're
this
never going to
time,
hear the end of that one, by the
That's
way.
true.
Jody, you won't procrastinate for 2 weeks and watch mermaid documentaries instead of the horror film.
Was this better than the mermaid documentary?
Yeah, a bit, yeah.
It's like, we had it on, and then he's like, I think I'm too tired tonight to watch a horror film.
I literally got through the previews and I was like, we should watch something else.
You went through the whole book of excuses. I think, for this one.
Yeah.
This mermaid documentary, we should really lean into this.
All right. Well, I think that probably wraps it up. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're good.
Huge thanks to Jordy and Kara
Absolutely,
for
thanks.
coming on the show. If you are in town, you have any inclination to do martial arts, check out CJ Martial Arts.
Absolutely.
And we haven't committed necessarily to what our next episode is going to be.
We have not.
Okay.
We're
Leave you in
waiting on
suspense.
guests at this point to line up our next episode.
Awesome.
What should our next movie be?
Yes, please.
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
What's the next thing we should watch?
Have
Okay.
you've seen Hereditary because we saw it in
I
theaters?
really enjoyed Hereditary.
Have you seen Hereditary?
I have not.
Okay, well that's what your
Yeah,
next
Maybe
recommendation.
a second watch would be good, right?
That's actually really good on second watch.
Yeah,
that would
I
be my
think so, too.
recommendation.
I
Do you have
think
another one?
No, I was thinking Hereditary, but then I was thinking, well, if you didn't like child violence, there might be a scene or two you didn't like in there. But if you've seen it already,
Yeah.
and it's not gory in the way that the baby Gristle it's not like that.
Yeah.
But it is one of those. I mean, like I mentioned off the top, same studio, A24, a debut film by a new filmmaker, and it's absolutely outstanding.
With the Wicker Man remake with Nicolas Cage is definitely what you
Yeah.
should watch.
The Wicker Man
Definitely,
remake.
yeah.
Yeah.
Any Nicolas Cage film.
Which
Willy's
Nicolas Cage am I
Wonderland.
going to see? The one that I like or the one I don't like?
It depends on your perspective.
Yeah. Is there a Nicolas Cage one that you'll like? Is the question.
Mandy.
Yes, actually, okay, I agree with that
Yeah,
one.
you should watch Mandy.
Mandy was very good.
Yeah.
Color Out of Space is a close one behind that one, but
Yeah.
if you don't like cosmic horror, the idea of the cosmos causing horror, then that might.
Maybe we'll have you on next season to discuss Mandy.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Mandy before, but I've always wanted to go back. I've only watched that one once, and I've always wanted to go back and rewatch it. But I was very impressed with Mandy.
That's probably one of Nicolas Cage's best
All right.
films ever. So
Yeah,
Mandy
there you
and
go.
Hereditary.
And the Northman. This movie made me want to watch the Northman.
yeah, Northman's good. It's to call it horror might
Yeah,
not.
I don't
be
think it's a horror film.
Maybe it has some horror elements, but it's not a horror film. primarily.
It's actually a tough one to pigeonhole
It is.
because I mean it's like this one, very historically accurate. There is violence in the film. I wouldn't call it a thriller. I wouldn't call it a mystery. It's kind of its own thing.
Yeah, and he also directed The Lighthouse. I think that's even less accessible than this
Yeah.
film. Like it's really
It's out there.
I heard really good things though.
It's
well done.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean to have. I mean, imagine having two actors in a lighthouse. It can't get more restricted
Yeah.
than that when you're trying to create a whole film.
But again, Jones' expectations don't go in expecting
Exactly.
like a
Yeah.
really scary horror film. It's more than stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. You've got a list of a few that you can start with.
Thank you.
Eggers is great though. Definitely watch some more Eggers.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
All right. So
Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the aisles.